In this video, we will use the properties of parallelograms and a little bit of algebra to find unknown values. So please remember the properties of a parallelogram. Starting with the definition, opposite sides are parallel. Then we have four properties of parallelograms. The opposite sides are congruent. Opposite angles are congruent. Consecutive angles, like these, are supplementary, so they would add up to 180. All right, that would be the same for angle A and D. For example, they would also be supplementary. And the diagonals bisect each other, so they cut each other in half. All right, diagonals are not necessarily congruent, so don't make that a false assumption. Okay, that's only going to happen if you have a rectangle. So let's use those properties. So let's start off using the property that the opposite sides of a parallelogram are congruent. So that means these two expressions should be equal to each other. So x plus 2 should equal 4. Subtracting 2 from both sides, that gives me x is equal to 2. So that's one of the variables I was supposed to find. Then we can use the other pair of opposite sides. These should also be congruent. So that tells me that y minus 5 should equal 12. Adding 5 to both sides, that tells me that y is equal to 17. So that's the other value we were supposed to find. Okay, number 13. Let's use the property that opposite sides are congruent. So for that reason, 3x plus 4 should equal 16. So subtracting 4 from both sides, I have 3x is equal to 12. And then dividing by 3, we see that x is equal to 4. So that's one variable. All right, now opposite angles are also congruent, so we can make an equation out of that. So that means that y minus 60 must equal 56. So if I simply add 60 to both sides, that should give me the value of y. So that's going to be 116. In number 14, we remember that the diagonals bisect each other. In other words, they cut each other exactly in half. So these two halves should be equal to each other. So that means that 3m should equal m plus 8. Subtracting m from both sides, that tells me that 2m is equal to 8. Okay, dividing both sides by 2, I discover that m is equal to 4. Similarly, these diagonals also bisect each other, so these two halves should equal each other as well. So that means that 2n minus 1 should equal 9. Adding 1 to both sides, I have 2n is equal to 10. And dividing both sides by 2, I discover that n is equal to 5. So those are the two values we were supposed to find. Alright, looks like number 15 is going to be just the same. Okay, so these two halves of the diagonal should equal each other. Alright, so that means 5j minus 9 should equal 3j. Okay, whenever I have a variable on both sides, I really want to subtract one of these variables to get the variables together. Now be very careful, this makes students nervous. I'm going to go ahead and subtract 3j from both sides. Okay, so these are going to cancel each other out. So a lot of students don't know what to do with this when they cancel out. You just need to understand that 3 minus 3 is 0. 3j minus 3j is 0. Put a 0 down. Okay, so that's going to leave you over here with 2j minus 9 equals 0. Don't forget the 0. Don't move the 9 over, and have it be 2j is equal to negative 9. I see all kinds of mistakes here. Alright, just put a 0. Anyway, the rest is simple. Okay, because you just add the 9 to both sides, so now I have 2j is equal to 9. So it looks like this is not going to go in evenly, which does not make me nervous. We're just going to have a fraction, no big deal. So divide both sides by 2, and that's basically the answer right there. Alright, we find that j is equal to 9 halves. Okay, just leave it as a fraction. Okay, don't force it to be a decimal. Now, the rest of it, these halves of the diagonal should also equal one another. So I'm going to have 6k is equal to k plus 10. So if I subtract k from both sides, that's going to give me 5k is equal to 10. And then if I divide both sides by 5, then I see that k is equal to 2. Okay, number 16. So I'm going to just work in alphabetical order. So first I want to find A. So I know that opposite angles are congruent, but I'm not given the opposite angle. So I have a choice. I could use the rule that consecutive angles are supplementary. So that means that 106 plus 7a minus 3 should equal 180, alright, because these two consecutive angles are supplementary, so they add up to 180. Alright, that way, so now I'm going to combine like terms. Alright, I do have some like terms here. I've got 106 and I've got negative 3. So I really should put those together first before I move on. So I'll have 7a, but 106 minus 3, alright, that is 103. Okay, then I would subtract 103 from both sides. Okay, so that is going to give me 7a is equal to, what is this, 77. And then when I divide both sides by 7 to get a by itself, I discover that a is equal to 11. Okay, the other way I could have done this was to recognize that instead of looking at these two angles directly, I could have looked at these two angles. These are consecutive angles, so they have to be supplementary. So I could have said to myself 180 minus 106. Alright, that is 74. So that means this would be 74. And then I could set these equal to each other. I could have gone 7a minus 3 is equal to 74. Then I would have added 3 to both sides, so that would have been 7a is equal to 77. Divided by 7, a is equal to 11. Okay, so that's just another strategy you can use if you want. Alright, anyway, for now, let's go back to finding b. So this time I can use the fact that opposite angles are congruent. Alright, so that means that the 9b minus 2 must equal 106. Okay, so I can go ahead and add 2 to both sides. So that will give me 9b is equal to 108. So I need to divide both sides by 9. So b is equal to 12. Alright, so that was it for number 16. Number 17 is a busy little graph. Alright, but in the end it's very similar to what we've been doing. So let's start with these. Alright, these are two halves of the same diagonal, so they should be congruent. Okay, so that means that 7s minus 24 should equal 4s minus 3. If I subtract 4s from both sides, that gives me 3s minus 24 is equal to negative 3. If I add 24 to both sides, then I'm going to get 3s is equal to 21. And then I would divide both sides by 3, and I end up with s is equal to 7. Okay, similarly, I can look at the other two halves of a diagonal. Alright, so this half of the diagonal and this half of the diagonal should be equal as well. So I can make that equation. So 9r minus 17 should equal 3r plus 13. Subtract the 3r from both sides. So that will be 6r minus 17 is equal to 13. Add 17 to both sides. Okay, so that's going to be 30. So now I have 6r is equal to 30. If I then divide both sides by 6, I end up with r is equal to 5. Okay, now so we have opposite sides and we have consecutive angles. Opposite sides are congruent, so I can simply make the equation 13k minus 9 should equal 5k plus 7. Whenever you have a variable on both sides, you should deal with that first by subtracting one of them away. So that will cancel. So now this is going to be 8. So this is going to be 8k minus 9 is equal to 7. And then of course I will add 9 to both sides. So that's going to give me 8k. These cancel. 8k is equal to 16. And then when I divide both sides by 8, I end up with k is equal to 2. So that's one of the values that I was supposed to find. Alright, now finally I have consecutive angles. And we have learned that consecutive angles, such as these, are supplementary. Okay, so I'm going to try to squeeze this in right here. They're supplementary, so these have to add up to 180. So I'm doing 12j minus 41 plus 5j minus 17 is equal to 180. Alright? Consecutive angles have to be supplementary. They have to add up to 180. So now, combining my like terms, I'm going to combine my 12j and my 5j. Okay, so that's going to make 17j. And then I'm going to combine my negative 41 and my negative 17. Okay, so that's going to be negative 58. And that is all equal to 180. So then I would add 58 to both sides. So that will give me 17j, these are gone, is equal to 238. Alright, time to divide both sides by 17. Alright, so divided by 17, 14. Okay, so J is 14. So those are the two answers to number 18. Okay, number 19. Well, we have opposite sides. Alright, and opposite sides are congruent. So I can just go ahead and set these equal to each other. So I know that 7c minus 13 should equal 4c plus 5. When you have the variable on both sides, go ahead and subtract one of them to get those variables together on the same side. So this will be 3c minus 13 is equal to 5. Then you add 13 to both sides. So that's going to be 3c is equal to 18. And then you divide both sides by 3. And you end up with c is equal to 8. Alright, so that's one of the things that we were supposed to find. Alright, so that's it for C. Then we have opposite angles. And opposite angles are also congruent. So I can go ahead and set those equal to one another. So I will say 10d minus 27 is equal to 6d plus 9. Subtract 6d from both sides. So that will give me 4d minus 27 is equal to 9. Plus 27 on both sides. So that's going to give me 4d is equal to 36, and then I need to divide both sides by 4. Alright, so that was it for problem number 19. Alright guys, that's going to do it for this video. Go ahead and click here in the red apple to watch the next video. Click in the green apple to subscribe, or click the yellow apple for the full playlist.